Brewster here. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is now getting tripped up over his own harsh descriptions of the Iranian regime. On ABC's Good Morning America, Rubio tried to justify the ongoing war against Iran by unloading on regime leaders.
Of course, he does that all the time to sell his war, this absolute disastrous war. That's what he tries all the time to sell it to the American people, but nobody's buying it.
Continuing move towards one day acquiring a nuclear capability. These people are lunatics. They are insane. They are religious zealots who can never be allowed to possess a nuclear weapon because they have an apocalyptic vision of the future. And all of their neighbors know that, by the way, which is why all of their neighbors have been supportive of the efforts we're conducting.
Obviously, every accusation is a confession of Donald Trump administration. Anything they say is actually confession.
Neighbors know that, by the way, which is why all of their neighbors have been supportive of the efforts we're conducting.
You call them lunatics, but the president just had this post where he says we're in discussions with a new and more reasonable regime. Let me try to pin you down on that. Who is this new and more reasonable regime? Is the United States in direct contact with them?
Well, I'm not going to disclose to you who those people are because it probably would get them in trouble with some other groups of people inside of Iran.
So, according to Rubio, the Iranians the Trump administration are talking to are reasonable, and those Iranian figures could get in trouble with other regime leaders who Rubio says are lunatics and insane. But
absolute bullshit. I mean, I'm sorry to be so blunt, but this guy lies. His boss lies. This whole administration, they lie. And what is even interesting is that you will notice them contradicting each other whenever they speak.
Rubio seemed to hedge on who is actually making decisions in Iran and might be able to negotiate an end to the war.
If there are new people now in charge who have a more reasonable vision of the future, that would be good news for us, for them, for the entire world. But we also have to be prepared for the possibility, maybe even the probability, that that is not the case.
Well, but the president said they are. Is that the case or is it not? I'm just trying to get some clarity on that.
Well, what I mean is, yeah, so you have people over there that are saying some of the right things privately. Obviously, they're not going to put it out in press releases, and what they say to you or put out there for the world doesn't necessarily reflect what they're saying in our conversations. But at the end of the day, we have to see if these people end up being the ones in charge, seeing if they're the ones that have the power to deliver. We're going to test it. We are hopeful that that's the case. There are clearly people there talking to us in ways that previous people in charge in Iran have not spoken to us in the past. Some of the things they're willing to do, some of the things they're saying they're willing to do. Obviously, they have to go do it. We're going to
absolutely shameful. I mean, he is contradicting himself. He's sometimes calling them lunatic, a religious zealot, and then the next thing you know, oh, some of them are good, some of them are sane, and this and that. The moment he gets caught by this reporter that, hey, your boss says that there are some people in the government who he can talk, who he can trust, and then obviously immediately Marco Rubio changed his entire story.
Test that proposition very strongly because we always prefer to settle things through negotiation and diplomacy.
But again, how does the Trump administration know it is actually negotiating with the right people in Iran who can make changes? Donald Trump keeps insisting that the new regime leaders have agreed to most of his 15-point peace plan. Iran's regime keeps issuing statements saying there have been no talks because any discussions right now would be unrealistic and unreasonable.
Every time you hear Donald Trump talking about, oh, we are talking with the Iranian, he's basically referring to his hand. He's talking to his hand. There is no Iranian representative talking to him about this negotiation, about this 13-point, 14-point, 15-point. These are all BS made-up stories by Donald Trump and Marco Rubio.
The awkward position that Rubio found himself in of trying to untangle some of Donald Trump's claims, well, that awkwardness has also emerged in White House press briefings. Here's reporter Dasha Burns of Politico grilling Trump spokesperson Caroline Levitt.
On Iran, the president has said that the administration is talking to a new and more reasonable regime. How confident are you that they are legitimate and have enough grip on power? Marco Rubio said earlier that he's not sure and it's not clear whether they will be in power. So are you also talking to other factions? As the president is trying to make a deal, how do you ensure that you're making a deal with the people who can actually implement it?
Well, that's part of the ongoing process that's taking place. And the ongoing negotiations, of course, anything that they say to us privately will be tested, and we will ensure that they are being held accountable to their word. And if they are not, the president has laid out the military consequences that the Iranian regime will see if they don't hold true to the words that we are hearing privately behind the scenes. When the president says more reasonable...
Well, you'll notice they use word like private behind the scene, just like she did. the reason for that is because whenever they are caught lying, they'll be like, oh no, by the way, in private, in behind the closed doors, that's what they said. You know, these liars, they're sometimes very, very smart.
Well, again, these folks are appearing more reasonable behind the scenes privately in these conversations than perhaps some of the previous leaders who are now no longer on planet Earth because they lied to the United States and they strung us along in negotiations, and that was unacceptable to the president, which is why many of the previous...
So they lied, so that's why they all got killed. So like how ridiculous this is. And you will see them always running away from this kind of question and going back to their talking point, which is this is the same thing as Donald Trump uses as his talking point, and that is that we are talking, we are negotiating, we are in good faith, and we are going back to Pakistan. But at the end of the day, you see no progress whatsoever.
Previous leaders were killed.
They lied to us. They strung us along. That was unacceptable, and so they were killed. Good
Yep.
grief. And this is from a Trump administration that repeatedly lies, strings along other nations, including our allies, and does things that many people find unacceptable. And Caroline Leavitt's description of cause and effect in Iran may not instill much confidence in the Iranian figures who are speaking to the Trump administration now. Because those Iranians face the possibility of being killed by other regime leaders merely for talking to the United States. And the allegedly more reasonable Iranians also face the possibility of being killed by the United States if they can't deliver on their promises to the Trump team.
Exactly.
And by the way, Donald Trump is threatening to destroy Iranian infrastructure, including power plants and water treatment facilities, if these negotiations are unproductive. Under international law, such attacks on infrastructure are war crimes. And back to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He's not even participating in the talks with the Iranians. Those talks are being led by Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner and Trump real estate attorney Steve Witkoff, with reports that Vice President J.D. Vance may get involved. A former CIA official calls the Trump administration effort nonsensical.
You never know with President Trump. You know, there's a wild card always. You know, the Truth Social post today when he talked about the new Iranian leadership as, quote, I think it was reasonable. That was rather preposterous. It's much more hardline. In fact, there's IRGC members there with a lot of American blood on their hands. So, you know, there is the idea of, well, perhaps, Trump is kind of getting bored with this. There's been a lot of reporting on that. But the actual kind of foundations of the diplomatic talks, the sides are so far apart. If they're talking, I guess it's a good thing, but I don't think there's any hope, even regardless of who the U.S. Negotiating team, whether it's Witkoff, Kushner, or
no, nobody's negotiating with anybody from Trump administration. The only thing that Donald Trump wants is that everybody in the world will believe that, somehow Kushner is a smart guy, he's a smart cookie, he's the son of love, President Trump, and look what he did. I mean, he's leading this negotiating table. The team. Unbelievable. This is all he wants, Donald Trump, is to portray himself and his family as the smart people. He, in fact, snubbed J.D. Vance and his name when he was asked this question, who is going back to Pakistan. He did not mention anything about J.D. Vance, but the U.S. Officials, they say, no, J.D. Vance is going. It is not that Kushner will lead. It is J.D. Vance will lead. But Donald Trump, my son-in-law, he's going to lead. He's going to be the main guy here.
President Vance, the other point on to raise is, where's Marco Rubio? He's the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor. He is the actual natural person to be involved in this, and he is totally absent from the scene.
Unless that scene includes network television appearances where Rubio has been trying to promote administration talking points even when they conflict. The Iranian regime is insane, but they have some new leaders who Trump says seem reasonable. And how does Rubio or Trump or anybody else know that the new leaders can actually speak for the regime? Nobody knows. And that's the state of the U.S.-Iran negotiations, if they are actually happening at all. Amidst all of this, the Strait of Hormuz remains blocked, oil and gas prices keep soaring, and the energy crisis...
I think the reason Marco Rubio will not be negotiating or will never be part of it is because Donald Trump doesn't trust him as much as he trusts his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. He doesn't trust even his own vice president. How can he trust Marco Rubio or anybody else for that matter? This is a real estate deal for Donald Trump, just like Gaza. And this is why he's sending the other rat, Steve Witkoff, to do some, nibbling on some food. That's how he thinks about this whole situation. that somehow they can outsmart other people, outsmart Iranian government, when in reality this is a totally different ballgame. Subscribe for more videos, guys. See you in the next one.